The GAA Hour with Colm Parkinson is brought to you by Paddy Power, home of the Money Back Special.
And when I started running, I suppose I didn't stop, and when I got the chance to go, I said I should go, and so I opened up.
We were only the small little fish out there, so we are on there.
So I forgot to mention on last Thursday's show that we have a live show tomorrow night in Liberty Hall. So we have Lark Corbett, we've JJ Delaney, we've Owen Larkin and Brian Gavin, and they're going to talk about the rivalry from 2009 until 2014. Basically those 5 years. And there's so many bloody incidents that happened in those games that I don't know how we're going to narrow it down. Dermot O'Sullivan, Charlie Carter and Derek McGrath then are on panel 2 that might focus a little bit on the match. But I suppose, Paddy Stapleton, I have to say welcome back to the show. We've missed you.
Yeah, cheers, Wooly. Yeah, I have to take a sabbatical there for a while. Work kind of gets in the way of the GAA sometimes.
It definitely does. What's your standout memory? You obviously played in 09, 10 and 11, so you were stuck right in the middle of it. I'm talking about I know your standout memory is Lara hat-trick and stopping the 5 in a row. I'm not even going to say anything else.
Yeah, after look, there's a few. I suppose 09, kind of going out into the field itself was really crazy. It's the first time in Cork Park with a full house, and just the sound. I'll never forget the sound as you jog. It was kind of in and out, waving up and down, and that was a weird one. And then I suppose 0-10. I think the last 5 minutes looking down into the canal end was surreal because it was just like a cauldron down there, and every ball was flying back down. I remember Seamus Hennessy put over a great score near the end, and that's when I kind of knew we had it clinched. And that was just even more so than lifting the trophy. That was kind of when you knew, and you spend the next 2 weeks bloody waking up wondering did it actually happen. And but then there's bad memories too. I remember Richie Hogan got a goal in 2011, and I'd say I was a centimetre away from flicking it off his hurley, and maybe I should have been able, but look, I didn't. And without that goal, we played poorly, but maybe we would have kept it tighter, maybe made it tighter at the end. So lots of memories, a lot of good ones, and then obviously a few bad ones.
Yeah, geez, I can only imagine what that feels like, Cheddar. We're sitting in here in the studio, you have 5-10 minutes left in an All-Ireland final, and you can actually relax. I felt it in matches, but never in a match of that magnitude. There's no better feeling in the world to know that you have it and you can enjoy this last 5 minutes.
No, I definitely can't match that. I definitely can't match Paddy's experiences in that. Look, we can only second guess, the feeling that would course through you, at that particular stage that, the game, as you say, Wooly, is in the bag. You still have got to play out, but you're enjoying playing out now the last 5 minutes. And it's not that often it happens, maybe in certainly latter day All-Irelands anyway, that, a lot of the games are quite close and it's just flat to the mat, even into overtime. You simply cannot, drop your guard here. But look, it must be the most wonderful feeling in the world, particularly for hurlers. Like, I just keep going back to this. I think just the game means that little bit more to us all.
Like that.
Sorry there, Wooly.
Come here, here's a good one, Paddy. Noel McGrath, I was surprised reading this. Noel McGrath's played in 6 All-Ireland finals. This one is going to be a 7th, and he's never played anyone outside of Kilkenny. Isn't that crazy stuff?
Unbelievable. I'd say, I'm sure Paddy Maher, Brendan Maher are the very same. I was the same. I think I played five against him as well, or something like that. But that's it, and it's strange. It's very strange. And actually, if you probably looked at Galway, we probably played them a lot in semi-finals as well. So it's just the way it is. But it's strange the years that we were down, the years they were down, we were down as well, I suppose, as well. So I think it's kind of a lot of coincidence, or maybe it was a lot of they were winning Leinster and we were winning Munster as well. But it just kind of, I don't know, maybe it's fate.
Yeah, maybe it is fate. Is that class of, was it, when were they all minors? 07, I think Sheedy had those.
06, 07, and then 10 they won the 21 with the seniors, so that was a serious, unbelievable.
They hammered Galway, in the final. That was it, and they're still hanging around, Cheddar, which is unreal in 2019.
Yeah, no, I think, Paddy, actually what's interesting about that is that look, up to the present time anyway, there's no real bitterness or meanness between the two counties. I can certainly remember that when it was a very, very different rivalry. So that's interesting. Maybe just a modern game, modern society, and that sort of level of tribalism, I'll just call it, or I'll categorise it, maybe isn't there anymore. But I just don't think it's down to the hurling now and down to, the I suppose the skills of the team in terms of winning the game. That sort of real meanness doesn't appear to be there anymore in hurling.
You don't live in Hurling, like or down around those parts, like you say. But no, I think you're right. But we'd all meet each other, and you'd have heard stories. The bitterness back then, I think, is there's no interest, there's not much television going on, and all you have is what you have around you. So you're suspicious of any lad who isn't inside your own parish, really. And I think that kind of thing has gone away, because now you have colleges and you're playing with lads and you're meeting lads all around the place. It's social media, you get to know people. And I think that kind of tribalism, as you said, is gone, but definitely the competitive nature is alive and well.
It is, and I suppose it brings me back. I certainly can't match, Paddy, your experiences, but I can go back a little bit further, I suppose. I think the first All-Ireland that I was at was 1971 with Kilkenny and Tipperary. And if you just consider, prior to that, there was a lot of bitterness between both counties. I think Kilkenny hadn't beaten Tip for something like 30 years before the 67 All-Ireland. And I think, they definitely wanted to do something like that. I think Father Tommy Marr, coming into Kilkenny in the late 50s, early 60s, changed the Kilkenny style into a much more physical style, I think. And there was probably a couple of incidents. There's a famous league final in 68. I think that there's a couple of pictures still knocking around of Pat Dillon clobbering somebody. There was a fair schmozzle in the square, I think. And then there's probably the Tommy Welsh incident in the 67 All-Ireland, which probably led into the 71 All-Ireland. It was the first game I was at. It was just unbelievable. Tip came out on the right side of it. Obviously, there was an awful lot of goals scored in that match. Actually, there was a couple of other interesting statistics in that match. Well, I think the final score was 5-17 to 5-14, so there was 10 goals, but it was an 80-minute final. I think it was the first time that an All-Ireland hurling final was broadcast in colour. And there was a couple of other interesting parts about it as well. Babs threw off his boots in the second half.
Was that match? Yeah.
I think he played in his bare feet. I don't think he even played in his socks. He scored 6 or 7 points, by the way. And I think he led. I think he may have actually given the final pass to Dinny Ryan for the killing goal. Incidentally, Wooly, it wasn't. I had seen that in the late 60s. I saw a minor final between Portage and Rathdowney. John Welsh threw off his boots. Bear in mind, back then, the boots were all leather hobnail boots.
You might be more comfortable without them.
You might be more comfortable without them. But just think for a minute. All of the safety legislation and regulations that's going around today, would you even be allowed out in the field in your bare feet anymore? But anyway, look, I'm going back a little bit there. But I suppose I'm just backing up that point, Paddy, that there was serious bitterness and meanness back then in some of those matches. There were some serious hits given and taken. Obviously, that's just not there today. And I take our point, Paddy, that a lot of it's probably to do with, look, everybody's playing one another in colleges now, so you certainly know one another an awful lot better than you would have had 30, 40 years ago, I guess.
Paddy was one of the last throwbacks of that era, so he was one of the last
that's a tough one, I know, Wally.
I get enough of that around home. I get enough of that around club hurling now.
No Boris Lee player will go on with that, Paddy.
No, wouldn't dream of it.
Come here, we'll move on here to ticket prices, because a lot of people are giving out about that. Eddie Brennan was leading the charge, and they're gone up to €90, so they're gone up a tenner, which is a fair old hike in a year. And 10 years ago in 2009 it cost €70, so that's a 28.5% increase in 10 years. Now, Paul Cody was tweeting about this. He's good when he gets his back up on Twitter, is Paul, and he's saying, how can the GAA justify an All-Ireland ticket for €90 in an amateur game? Family of 4 was spent 360. It's a very good point. Then he started doing his maths. 72,000 seats by 90 and 10,000 Hill 16 tickets by 50. Comes out around 7 million. Now, that's not including the corporate boxes all around, so it'll come out more than that. And he is saying, that's outrageous. It's hard to disagree with him, Cheddar.
I know I would disagree with Paul here. Wally, I think there's a number of aspects that I would like to discuss. But look, the €90, if you compare it with the entertainment and the skills value, you get in comparable games. I just had a quick look before I came out. I mean, Ireland and England in rugby is 115. It's 150 for the premium. The Europa League final was 135 a couple of years ago with Porto and Brava or whoever else was playing in it. And I think, what's coming up in a couple of years' time in a day, or the Ryder Cup is something like, 130 and €140 on the final day. And I wouldn't trade any of them for 5 minutes of an All-Ireland hurling final. So in terms of comparability, I think the prices stand up. And you need to look at it from an economic perspective as well. Is it keeping within rate of inflation and that? And I probably think it is. I have a couple of problems with it, though. The other point I wanted to make is, Paul and myself and a whole lot of other people are screaming at the GAA, looking for money for promotion and development of games and so on, so on, so on. And look, where does the money come from? It doesn't grow on trees. So I think we've got to be a little bit more realistic in the way we actually look at that. I have a couple of issues with it though. And bear in mind, it didn't go up for 10 years. I think if the GAA said, look, it's going up now, we're not going to put it up every year. We're not going to put it up again actually for 5 years. I think people would be happy enough with it. The one other little issue that I have with it, there's two other issues I have with it. Just now, this could have been communicated well in advance. Maybe it was done last February or March. I don't know, but I certainly can't remember it. But just, putting it out there before an All-Ireland, I don't think is the right way to do your business. And the last point I'll make on it is probably the most important point I want to make. As far as I know, I stand corrected on this, I think it's €90 for all seats in Croke Park, regardless of whether you're down in the front corner that you can hardly see the far end or not. And I do think that, they should look at maybe a tiered pricing for tickets. Now, I would still only leave the best seats at €90. I would tier it down rather than tier it up for certain seats. And I would also like to look at people who go to games regularly and look, considering all the communications that's there now, or all the technology that's there now. You go into Croke Park and your ticket is it's scanned. It's scanned in some way or other anyway. Yeah. So all the technology is there to know that you've gone to all of the games. Surely we can join up all the technology and just say, look, this person or this family has been at every game. Let's give them priority. I don't think it would be that hard to do. It's not easy, but with modern technology, I don't think it would be hard to do. So they're the points I'd like to make on it, Willie.
Yeah, that's the thing, Paddy. Like, I mean, when you go to the new camp and I've gone, you're choosing the tier that you want, and I always go for the nosebleeds because it's cheaper and. Like at Barcelona games it's never full, so you can just walk down at half time. But like, I mean, it would obviously be full. It is strange that it's tiered number one. It is strange that children are charged full whack when a family of 4 is $360, and that's before a train from Thurles, and that's before getting some food and feeding the 4 of them. And that's before even thinking of getting a pint that night. You'll have to go home because you'll have run out of money. They're like, I mean, I don't know, is this kind of are families being priced out of that day?
I think that's probably the biggest, most important aspect is they're not catered for at all. They're not even thought of. Families aren't thought of a bit. And like it's the one match of the whole year in the hurling and football. The GAA know they have everybody over a barrel. Okay, now I think Cheddar is right. The association isn't going to run on spring water. Like, it's not going to happen. They have to generate the funds. This is the one where they can really, I suppose, milk it. And I don't down them for that, but it's the way they're going about it is a little bit kind of short-sighted in that these kids, like, we want these kids involved in 10 years, 20 years' time. We want them playing, we want them supporting, we want them administrating, whatever we want in clubs. And this is pushing them away. And I know, like, I've actually talked to somebody this morning who has gone to every tip match this year on a bus with another crowd. And what they're doing now, instead of going to the match Sunday, the one they should all be at, they're going to a local pub with the same bus full of people, and they're going to watch it there and try and make the best of it. But really, they should be there. And as Cheddar said there, he said there should be a scan, and there's all the technology to do it, and there should be, and maybe even the worst seats in the house. Make a section there for family ones that have been there all year. You just have to look into it a little bit further than just €90 per ticket.
Because in fairness to the GAA, for the All-Ireland final, tickets don't go on general sale, right? So it's all through the clubs, isn't that right, Cheddar? Now, I think competing counties potentially should get more than they get. Would that be fair?
I think, look, if you were in the competing counties, you would definitely say that, Wooly. But it's a very, very difficult nut to crack here. Because you'll have a huge amount of people from, you'll have people from Antrim and Derry who are as much interested in hurling as I am or as Paddy is, and want to go to an All-Ireland. And, I've been at a number of All-Irelands, Paddy, when I'd say also I've seen, families at it, and, you'd see small little sprats, 4, 5 and 6, and where it's great to ingrain them in the culture and all of that. But there's an awful lot of adults that went to an awful lot of matches and coached an awful lot of kids, didn't have the chance to go to the All-Ireland then. Look, it really, I would think, particularly where hurling has gone in the last couple of years, you could probably sell Croke Park twice over with adults alone if you marketed it right and all of those things. And it's a difficult one to crack. And I think the family is one. Look, I can certainly understand where things are, because look, if dad and mum is going to the match, well, look, if they're going to leave the kids at home, they're going to have to get babysitters and all of that, and there's knock-on effects to all of these things, and I fully understand that, but it is difficult to do. One final point on it, Wooly, that I'd like to make. I think the funding that comes in for the All Ireland, the Leinster funding, Munster funding goes to Munster councils. The All Ireland and All Ireland semi-finals, as far as I know, might go to headquarters
and
funding.
Quarters as well. Yeah, I think.
And the revenue, and then how that's paid out. It's all covered in the GAA's annual accounts and all of that, and I don't want to get into the depth in that because you need accountancy expertise to do that, but it's pretty well explained, and I think there may be some things that you might look around that you might change some things around, which will give you a little bit of leverage then to be able to change the pricing. But I do go back to that point. I think paying €90 for a seat, I don't know what the actual row is now, but we'll say if you were on the very corner seat down beside Hill 16, versus being in the centre. Yeah. And the other side of that, of course, is if you're covered in, surely it attracts a premium rather than just sitting out in the open air. So I think it would be worthwhile looking at that. But I would simply say the top fee is €90, and let it cascade down from that.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. It's definitely not an easy one to get right. We know that from the conversation we're just after having. I do take Cheddar's point, Paddy, about the families, like 4-year-old child, who doesn't have the attention span to be watching it, is sitting in a seat kind of messing and playing. Is there an age limit on children, like from 7 upwards? That there'll always be people giving out in the GAA. It's never
I
going.
do too, Willie. You see me on Twitter, they'll be like, "Do you even like the GAA?" But I know. But I do, I have little glimpses of being up at matches in Croke Park when I was very, very young as well. So I think you can sow seeds as well. But does it mean, is that more important that somebody from a county who will never be there getting to see it with the interest they have? I don't know. As you said, it's hard to track. But the only other point I'd make is, for €90, if you're like, I'd pay more than €90 for a really good seat at that. As Cheddar said, like the entertainment you get out of an All Ireland final. I've been at rugby matches and they're absolutely. Now, I'm not like other people who give out about rugby all the time, but they're actually worse to be at than they are to watch on television. Yeah. Like, they're really, really hard to be at. So, like, you're paying massive money for this, like an All-Ireland hurling final. I mean, that's semi-final. How much would you have paid? Anybody coming out with a gate would have said, I'd have paid double to get back in, or treble.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
And the other thing is this money generated, like, I've been up kind of negotiating with GAA a few years ago about better standards for inter-county players, maybe more tickets, more this, more that. That's all costing money, and I have to be fair to them too and say, well, they have to throw a lot of money into that. So this, as I said, this is the time of the year that can actually charge a lot of money, so I suppose it is going to go into the right places.
Yeah, no, exactly, and they do put it all back in, or the majority of it back in, either to games development or to actual facilities and stuff. So it is hard to be critical of them. I think there's career critics of the GAA out there who just do it all the time, and I look, to be honest, I can see both sides of this one.
There's one final point on that. Sometimes you go to an All Ireland and you see some people that clearly don't have an involvement in the GAA, and maybe very well be the people that just go to an All Ireland because it's the occasion to go to. And look, it's difficult to separate that. They may very well be in as part of sponsors. There may be media people that you're trying to influence or something like that. So it's just difficult to manage and just satisfy everybody.
Yeah, okay. So Eddie Brennan has been on about Brian Cody and his management style versus Liam Sheedy. So Cody obviously played down his influence on the sideline, like he's joking about saying, I always feel helpless. You're put there and you can pretend you have this huge influence on things. It's all about what's happening on the field. You can't go on the field. I would never have any sense of my absolute importance to the player on match days at all. It is the importance of the players and what they bring. You live and die by that. I can probably see where he comes from, Cheddar. I'm sure as a manager, like, you can make some substitutions. You have to trust their game intelligence and what they're going to do on the field. And Brian Cody's lucky in that regard, in that Kilkenny, just through tradition and through hurling brain and skill, that they're able to figure some things out on the field as well.
I think Brian was just giving maybe a general comment, maybe to a general question. There definitely is an awful lot more to it than that. And I would say that, Brian wouldn't have had the success he had if it was that simplistic, I would think. But I think there is certainly a lot of truth in what he says. Look, you need to have everything, your work is done beforehand. Your whole game planning, in terms of the way that the team's going to set up, the markers, the matchups, your system of play, your changes in that system of play that you want to do to knock the opposition out. You will probably do some what ifs on the opposition. So if they play this way, what are we going to do next? And when you have all of that done, then you're looking down at each of the players. What's their role, and do they fully understand it? And are there any more questions that need to be asked here? And when you follow that, then you look at your leadership in the player on the field, which you've probably been developing right throughout the course of the year. So then Brian's, when you have all that work done, well then look, the game should go for you. You're either good enough and the game should go for you. And Brian has said before, and we've got to listen to him here, because look, his record speaks for itself. I think he said somewhere previously that at best I have maybe 20 or 30% influence on the performance of the team. I would think if he took out the preparation out of that, I would believe that all right. But if you were to talk about the preparation, the way the team was set up and all of the things that I've just explained there, well then that's very, very different. So I think what Brian says is true, but he probably hasn't incorporated into that all of the pre-planning that goes on beforehand. And if you were to do that, I think that would be a little bit different. I think what's really important here is that if you have strong leaders and intelligent leaders who understand what's going on in the field, first of all can communicate some things to you, but equally can make some decisions themselves. Well, look, that's gold dust within a team. Not every team has it.
No, definitely not. So Eddie Brennan was saying Brian drives the guys on, he pushes them, he forces them to figure things out. He wants you to be as good as you can be. And we know he has that kind of style. Henry Shefflin has spoken about how he ignored him. He was cutthroat with Tommy Walsh. He was cutthroat with Charlie Carter. He doesn't... I don't think he creates a very strong relationship. A bit like Jim Gavin, maybe. He's more standoffish, where those decisions are easier for him.
I might just come in on that, though. You've got to understand context here. Kilkenny are one of the top teams. Would that management style work in Westmeath, Carlow, Laois, Antrim?
No.
Well, look, so you've got to understand context here. There's a hurling history in Kilkenny of players being the best that they want to be the best that they can be, because they understand that that's the way the Kilkenny machine works and has always worked. That's no different than going back to Father Tommy Maher and some previous people, Pat Henderson. That's the way it has worked, and it has served them well. But it has served them well from within a certain context. Would that management style work in, as I said, in some of these counties? Well, look, that's open to debate. So I think that needs you just cannot look at something
that works in
singular.
Kilkenny. It works in Kilkenny, because Eddie's saying Liam has a different type of personality. He loves being in the middle of the lads, a come and do it with me approach. He would have a closer relationship with guys, more relaxed. That's his way of doing it. Though you have to bear in mind, Brian has been doing it for 20 seasons. Liam's only in his 4th year of inter-county management. So, Paddy, you were contributed to an RT, an article on the RT website, and you were talking about Liam. So I suppose take it up from there. What's Liam? He does strike me as a player's kind of man, a bit closer to the players.
Yeah, I'd say he definitely is close to players, and there maybe be a group in there that he'd keep very close contact with, and they're probably, I wouldn't say they're on a peer level, but there isn't a massive barrier between Liam and the rest of them. But I think saying he's very relaxed, I actually wouldn't have seen that too much in there. Now, he's very approachable and that, but certainly there's a fair intensity that I don't know if you get looking at him on Sunday game or any of that. You might on the sideline after seeing him after the Wexford match last day, but there is an unbelievable drive in him. I would call him maybe just an ultimate alpha male.
Right.
He would stand up to anybody. Even if he was the smallest dog in the fight, he would stand up to anybody. And that's players, opposing managers. Even if you remember 08, the All-Ireland semi-final, he probably got too carried away. It was him against Davy Fitz on the sideline. And there was goals going in and the managers were celebrating and goals going in the other side. So I think he probably learned from that, but absolutely massive like that. He's very driven. I've heard a lot of people say to me, was Eamon O'Shea the brains behind 0-10 and all around that time. And obviously Eamon O'Shea hurling-wise was fantastic, but without Liam Sheedy, that type of strong-minded attitude wouldn't have worked. And the fact that who we got in around him. These things don't just happen now. There's 27 people in the backroom team, and he's brought them all into a specific job now. And the one thing I'd say to you is he never thinks he's the smartest person there, but he'll get them all in. And he always makes it a closed group. So if you just say there's 40 players now and there's 27 backrooms, so there's 67 people involved with Tipperary. And you'd talk about Tipperary as if there'd be things coming out of the camp, and there hasn't been a peep this year that I've heard. The only thing I heard was that coming up to the match against Wexford about 2 hours beforehand, that Seamus Kennedy will be playing. And that is all I've heard. And that just shows how much he brings. As Eddie says, he's bringing everybody together. We're all going on the one mission. And he is a little bit like that. But I think he's a lot more than just a bit relaxed. You know, when he speaks, I mean, you'd hear a pin drop in the room, and he just commands so much respect.
Yeah, there's a steel to him. He's definitely, I take the alpha male thing, you know, like, I mean, and some people talk about the alpha male like that's a negative thing, you know, in the current kind of society. I don't know, that's almost like frowned upon, but like, I mean, that's a compliment.
It definitely is, and toxic masculinity, they say, but it's just, it comes out of him. Even if, like, Liam was a good player, but he was over the minors in 06 and 07, and there's just something about him, you know, the crack, and there's just some people when they walk into a room, they just have it, and he has it. Sorry, Cheddar, there.
No, I fully back up that, Paddy. Look, I think, first of all, that old type of autocratic manager where, you know, you're given some tasks to do and you do them right the way the manager says, or you're for the high road, and a sort of management through fear and sort of, you know, intimidation really, I suppose. I think that's well gone. It's well gone in all walks of life. Paddy, you even see it in schools. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but it's definitely gone. It's definitely gone in business and all of that, and it's much more you know, a manager now is a visionary, I suppose, and you know, he's much more caring, and you know, much trusts his players much more, and I suppose if I was to just put it into one word, you know, I think that type of manager has a sort of a growth mindset for their players, or a development mindset for their players, and then bring it all together into a team environment. I think that's very different, and I'm not too sure that there's any of the old style managers out there, you know. And you know, I've heard and seen you know, some articles written around Brian, you know, bearing what Brian's day job was, ended up as a principal in a school. And look, the same thing applies here. You know, you're trying to motivate people to be the best that they can be. You know, there's a whole pile of literature written around this motivation in work and all of that, or about reaching your true potential and all of those things. It's the very same thing that's going on here. Develop the player to be the very best that he can be, and that's everything. It's him as a human being as well as everything else. And then I suppose it's empowering him to do that. So, you know, you've got to take players' views on board. At the end of the day, they're the people that see it first on the field, and they probably feel it the most. And you know, you've got to take their views on board and give them some ownership of the game plan and all of those things, and then pull it all together. And I'm really, I go back to the point you say, Paddy. You know, the selection of your management team needs to reflect, you know, your vision of where the team is going to go, and all of those things. That they've got to be key people in their own area. And I'll finish with one final sentence. Because the other, probably one of the greatest managers might have been Ferguson, and he said, but you are always the manager, and you can just second guess, you know. So in other words, he's making the point that you made about Liam. Look, he's firm. You know, don't cross the line here. You know where the line is, but he is firm in that. So you're always the manager.
Yeah, I think if you command respect, that's not something you learn. You either have that or you don't. And Liam Sheedy seems to have it.
Well, you earn it. You don't have it. You earn it, and you have to show the players that you earn it. But of course, respect is a two-way street. You know, it has to go both sides.
Yeah, exactly. A good one, Paddy, in that article as well on the RT website was prior to the All-Ireland semi-final against Waterford in 2010, Sheedy refused to name-check John Milan, often a thorn in the Tipperary side, referring to the corner forward by the colour of his helmet. Is this one true? It's a good one.
That is true, yeah. No, honest to God, in 3 years there, I don't think he ever name-checked any player.
Really?
Or 2-3 years there. I swear, he never... That was the only time I've ever heard him talk about man-marking anybody. And he referred you. Actually, it was funny. I was injured. The Hammer by Cork fine. I got injured before the Wexford match and couldn't play. That was grand. Then we went on to play Offaly, and he brought me back into the team for that. And after that game, I think we played Galway. Blah 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 was going along. And before we played Waterford, we had a challenge match against Galway under 21. And he put me in full back in that match. And just so happened, I thought afterwards, did he tell the Galway under 21s that there was a small lad with a red helmet playing full forward. So I was, but after the match, he never even really said it in so many words that, you know why you're playing full back now. I said, yeah, there's a lad with a red helmet and you'll be on him. And that was it. That was absolutely it. There was no building him up. It was all about, in my opinion, it was all about, we build up my players. These lads have to think about themselves. I have to build up them. I'm not going to build up Henry Shefflin playing against Kilkenny. I'm not going to build up, Ken McGrath playing against Waterford. I'm going to make the best out of my players, and as Cheddar said, make them the best that they can be, because the one thing I can always remember Liam saying was, it's all about what we have in our room, and that's it. And to be fair, he lived it. He absolutely lived that, and I can honestly say that was the one time I could ever hear him say anything in a meeting or anything individually to anybody to pick up a specific player. He just wanted us to be our best, and he thought that would be good enough.
Yeah, geez, I think that's a good one though, Cheddar, right? So instead of making a hero out of Milan, saying Milan this, Milan that, and almost create a fear factor around Milan or any player, just completely make him another player, and the lad with the red helmet. I can see the logic behind that, or the psychology behind it.
No, definitely can. You can't overbuild players, because otherwise, not what are you saying to the person they're sending out to mark him? Look, you're not able to mark him. Paddy, I wonder what if Milan came out with a yellow helmet the next day, what would you do?
Well, if it was me, I would have ran the other way to a lad with a red helmet, because I know what happened to me that day with the red helmet. As the lad said, I should have been put off or taken off. So.
Right, okay, listen, that's a good one though, I have to say. So it is going to be an interesting one, Sheedy versus Cody, because again, it's 1-1 between the two of them, right? 9-10, and then Sheedy left, and that was it. So this is the best of three. Winner takes all on Sunday. Just one other quick one, and we've spoken about this before. There's nothing new in this. I just read it in that article, and I thought it was interesting that the average age of Cody's first All-Ireland winning team in 99 was 25.8, right? So it's 6 months younger than the team that beat Limerick the last time. So you're not talking about an older squad. It was a very similar age profile. In that loss in 1999, the starting team had 2 students and not 1 teacher. So it had builders, and it had farmers, and it had electricians, and it had all different trades, and farmers and stuff like this. The starting 11 against Limerick had 10 players that were either students or teachers. So that unreal, 10 years. So I don't know if it's a changing society, Cheddar, or is it a changing demands on players. We've spoken about this. A lot of players now at intercounty level are students or teachers, and they're choosing those careers because they've the summers off. Look at Paddy. He's got the feet up here. I'm not sure if that... I wouldn't say at that time, Paddy, that came into your thinking, but do you see it maybe even in the classroom?
I do. I certainly see it from club players, young county players. But I think a lot of what it has to do with is, when you're choosing your career, you're hoping to choose a passion. But I think at that age, a lot of kids their passion is hurling. You're so narrow-minded. I was so narrow-minded. I went straight actually into the civil service. That's how narrow-minded I was. And I don't talk to anybody who was working with me, because I did very little, only daydream about hurling. And when you just have that passion, that's all you could see. So I know that a lot of them are saying, well, I'll do the teaching, it'll be handy for the hurling. And that's a lot of the reason they're choosing it. And they don't know. So when you're 17 or 18, I'd say the majority of people, certainly boys, young fellas with ideas in their head, they don't know what is going to suit them for the rest of their life. So I think that's more the thing that it is, that they literally don't know, but right, my passion is hurling, and I'm going to facilitate that with teaching.
Yeah, that seems to be the way, Cheddar.
Yes, no, I'd say there is a little bit of that in the Paddy, all right, but there is a serious change. I think there was some statistics maybe 10 years ago that I think primary school teachers, maybe more now than secondary, were something like 95% female. I think that statistic has changed around a fair little bit. Well, look, it would be very interesting, Paddy, if it was to do with that it facilitated your earlier part of your hurling career in that. I think it might have something to do with something a little different though. And Paddy, I'll let you explain the handy job that teachers have at the minute. But anyway, no, look, it is interesting, and I've seen that actually recently.
But it's perfect though, Cheddar, for the summer. You've recovered. You're a professional athlete all summer.
No, you are, and I think there's another part to it as well. It would be brilliant if that's the case, because it certainly would have a serious difference in a school. And look, we know this that Kilkenny have been looking at this for a long time back. They absolutely make sure that there are certain teachers in the school, whether they're male or female, that are going to give the right leadership, I suppose, for hurling within that school, in all their schools. And it has obviously stood them in good stead. Just back to your initial point, Wooly, look, it is difficult to break into Kilkenny or Tipperary. Age is not the issue. And look, one of the best players that's going to be playing next Sunday didn't break into the Kilkenny team till he was 24 or 25, TJ. Who would have thought it now that 5-6 years ago he was considering just giving up the game because he couldn't just get on the team. So that's what Tipperary, Galway, Cork, And Kilkenny have, they have a big volume of high quality players, and the competition for places is absolutely savage. And that's why it makes it a little bit easier for Brian to manage the way he does, because that simple competition for places and the competition in the training, everybody has to reach a high standard. You have to, or you can close the door from the outside and go home. And that has happened. We've seen that happening with some very, very skillful players. So the savage competition in the dressing room, just to grab a panel jersey next Sunday, is brutal in Tipperary and in Kilkenny in both counties. And that in itself, what more would you want?
Yeah, no, exactly. Right, listen, we've done enough on the top of the show, lads. We'll talk about the match next. I was reading Cyril Farrell in The Independent, and he was saying after the more tactical finals of 17 and 18, we're going to get a more traditional game this time. And it made me kind of think, Paddy, and this is the same as Gaelic football. Teams that play a defensive kind of tactics are called tactical teams, and teams that play offensive tactics are just playing, traditional brand. It's almost impossible that you can have a tactic that's an attacking one. They all have to be defensive ones, or else they're not a tactic. Yeah,
I know. I think it's I think it gets lost in the language a little bit, that people just talk in a particular way. But I mean, I'm watching Wexford last day. Everyone talks about defensive structures. I thought it was the most offensive first half I've seen off a Davy Fitz team in an awfully long time. So I think that's poor talk. The match next day, traditional. It is traditional, as in, look, you will to look at it, to the naked eye, maybe. To the untaught eye, it looks like 6-on-6 both sides of the field. But look, like any good team, like the really, really good teams can organically defend as a unit and go forward as a unit. And I think that's what you see, and I think that's what Tip and Kilkenny have tried to do over the last 10 years. But certainly, Paddy Maher has been playing centre-back, but he's been playing a very, very deep line centre-back over the last 4 or 5 months. So I think there's a lot more tactics coming in, and I think even what I said about not name-checking players, I think that has come into it, and I think you've seen Tip have done matchups a lot more this year, because teams are just so much better to pick each other out that you can't judge. You need maybe a fast lad, you need a fast lad on him, or a big lad, you might need a big lad on him. So there is a little bit more tactics than was going in before. I do.
I was going to mention that to you just based on what Liam Sheedy was like in 09 and 10 maybe with you, like Brendan Maher, Mark and Gallan. That wouldn't have happened in 09. Do you know what I mean? Now Liam Sheedy's obviously evolved that side of it.
He has, even Ronan Maher going back on Conor McDonald, and Conor McDonald is as good in the air as a forward as is in the game, and they had somebody to go back on him. So I think Rory O'Connor, Brendan Maher on him the last day, knew that he had legs. You could have a great player on a Rory O'Connor, but just the fact that he's so much legs, and the fact that Wexford would pick players out, it's not a shot into nothing, it's not a hopeful ball into forward, it's directed at him, and they're going to get his pace into the game, that okay, we do need a flyer on him, and we need a lad who's going to be very, very tough. So it's very smart stuff really. And I think early in the year, Tipperary were experimenting in the league. They were switching lads in different positions. Ronan Maher was playing cornerback at times. I'd say Tip public were wondering what's going on here at all, but now we see it coming to fruition in the semi-final and maybe in the final.
Yeah, you see, when I see traditional hurling, I think of like Ken McGrath, Tommy Walsh throwing it up and winning a great catch and then throwing it up over their shoulder, Cheddar, not looking but clearing it down the field. You won't see any of that, I'd imagine. Definitely not from Tipperary. You might see the odd clearance from Kilkenny. So I don't know, is it even traditional hurling? It's still modern hurling,
I think there's a premium now on possession of the ball and use of the ball that may not have been there previously. But I just keep going back to Willie. It all depends on the resources you have. If you have catchers in the forward line, well, look, you can lash it up the field and you're going to get a very, very high percentage of those, and then work from there. If you don't have that, you simply cannot put it in high. You've got to put it into space. So I think when you see all of the teams, the management teams, and particularly the coaching people in those teams, are really looking at, and this is going back to what Paddy said about Liam, maximising the strengths that you have in your dressing room, and hoping that that's enough to cause enough problems for the opposition. Of course, you need little tweaks in that as you go through the matches and that as well. But I think, Paddy, what you mentioned something there. I think the matchups on Sunday, by the way, I completely disagree with Cyril Farrell. This game may start traditional, but I can tell you it'll be hugely tactical. And I would suggest that the reaction to what's in front of them by both managers will probably determine the winners of the game. So I think what Paddy alluded to earlier on in terms of matchups is crucial for Sunday as well. Who's going to take Colin Fennelly, for example.
Well, that's a big one. Is James Barry going to come back to mark him, and he's a good matchup for him?
Well, to be honest with you, he actually is a good matchup for him. And I'd have been a little bit critical. I hate being critical of players, but I've been a little critical of James at different times, because when teams open up space inside, then James trailers players out to the ball, and he's in a little bit of trouble. But this is a different game. Colin Fennelly hasn't left the large square most of the time. Very, very incredibly strong player. Much more than what he actually looks. So will James Barry come back full back and take it on? Of course, then if Kilkenny change it up and do something different, then you're back to where you were again. So I think even the starting matchups will be hugely important. And I think there's one other thing that we might refer to later on. What both half-forward lines do, I think, will determine, how tactical and the reaction to the tactical that's going to be needed. And I think it'll be really interesting from both managements how they start. Will they try something at the start to throw out the other team? Because both of them are broadly similar. Looking how is it going to play out? Well, if you look at the semi-finals, both of them will withdraw their half-hour line for different reasons. Tipple will withdraw theirs to be able to shoot from distance because they've got real class forwards to do that, so they need a little bit more space to do that. Kilkenny will withdraw John Donnelly and Walter to mark that type of player. They did against Limerick. It was very, very successful for them. TJ plays that sort of role most of the time anyway. If he's at 11, he plays out the field, and then he drifts in behind the half back line. So I think how both teams set up their half-hour line, what they do will be hugely important. And of course there's other consequences to that, because that releases now your half-back line. So who's the best distributors on the half-back line? You would probably say a Tip at the minute. Yeah.
Well, you say Paddy Maher is definitely a good, the best distributor. I was looking at some matchups. Number one, Paddy, the James Barry thing. And number two, I was looking at Cathal Barrett will take up Mullen, Brendan Maher will take up Walter Walsh, and I think Heffernan might follow TJ. Just say don't hurl any balls, just follow him around the field.
Jeez, I don't know what I have a view over Tipperary now on Sunday, thank God.
No, I'm only an Egypt that's thrown this out there.
No, I applaud that you give it your best. Okay? I don't see it. Because I couldn't give my best to the football. If you heard me on about the football, you'd tell me hang up. But no, look, some of it, yeah, fair enough. Personally, I think the two biggest ones you have to be matching up is Colin Fennelly and TJ Reid. I think Ronan Maher will stay full back. I think we're looking for that mixture in our back line over the last 6 months, and Ronan looked just unbelievably assured there, and full back and centre back are so important. I think TJ Reid will be picked up by Brendan Maher. I think Ronan Barry has played brilliant the last day, and Barry actually probably wouldn't be known as a marker before Sheedy guys handed him. So it shows what great coaching is going on inside. But I think he's too important. Brendan has man-marked all year. He can play centre-back as well. He can mark and he can strike ball. He can balk a player if he needs to, or he can run with him. He can, and TJ, if TJ isn't stopped in some capacity, now you're not going to stop him the whole match, but if he's not in some way balked and gone with, then I think, Tipperary would be in a lot of trouble. And also, Paddy Maher has the ability to play at the wing, who I would think maybe would feed into him marking Walter Walsh then, because, size-wise, he's something similar to him. So I'd see it kind of working like that. And the other thing I'm wondering is, Mullen moves. So Mullen isn't going to stay as a corner forward. He's absolutely fantastic at it. So he's there and he's moving out. So I'm wondering, is that the role that Barry Heffernan, if he's playing, is going to be given, in that's what he did the last day, cornerback but coming out the field? And would they prefer to keep Cathal Barrett inside along with, Colin Fennelly's in there, has great pace and strength, and maybe it's that option to keep him in beside the goals, because a lot of teams like to bring Cathal Barrett out away from his own goal to exploit a bit of space. So I'm wondering, could it pan out maybe a little bit more like that? Right,
okay, so Cathal Barrett might take up Richie Hogan then, who might be in and around that area, or he'd be out as well. His Paddy's matchups make much more sense to me. Obviously Brendan Maher marked all the danger men, so the obvious thing then is he will take up TJ. Cheddar.
Yeah, no, I agree. Actually, I agree with Paddy there. I'm not so sure actually that Paddy or Parry will be moved out centre back. Actually, they may look at a different plan of managing TJ, you know, maybe it's a midfielder, handles him when he's out in the middle of the field, and then he hands him over to Paddy once he goes through the half-back line. I think Paddy's sort of important in terms of distribution of ball and that. And, you know, so where does Seamus Kennedy or Kennedy fit into it then, I wonder. But I think, actually, Paddy, what will be really interesting is, you know, if you look at what Kilkenny, if you look at what Tipperary do, if Tipperary playing Niall O'Mara, Noel McGrath and John O'Dwyer on the half-forward line, they don't want to be caught up with Conor Fogarty, Pádraig Welch or Paddy Deegan, or maybe it might be Buckley, might be wing back. They don't want to be caught in that where they're sort of tied down. So if they're pulled back the field a little bit, and you know, they've proved this the last day, look, their shooting range is anywhere from midfield in, particularly starting off. So they shoot from distance, but they're also galloping in then to link up with Jamie Callan and with John McGrath and Jason Ford inside. That's difficult to mark, because I think Kilkenny will have learned a lot from 2016. They will not let their half-back line step out the field again and leave a lot of space in front of that full forward line. You simply can't. So if that happens, then... So if the tip half-forward line steps out the field, that means that the Kilkenny half-forward line, particularly the two wingmen, are going to have to step up the field. And if you look at the last day, we'll say, you know, Limerick were taking their players well out the field. That's the way they play. Walter was past midfield most of the time. So was John Donnelly. When you look at some of the challenges in the shoulders that he threw in, they were outside midfield. But when you do that, you know, Walter's a very accurate player and scores a lot, but rarely scores out the field. It's nearly always inside of 45. John Donnelly is the same. So their threat out the field for scoring is much less. And I think Lee might look at that and he might say, well, look, on the risk here, my men are going to score from distance if they find space. But I'm not so sure about Kilkenny. So leave Walter and leave John come out here. Once my players get a ball here, maybe a little pass into open space, they'll still pop the pint. And I just think that the advantage is with Tip in all of these moves, because when you do that, now your half-back line is free. So if you were working the ball through the hands out to the half-back line, you give it to Paddy or you give it to Barry Heffernan, their ability to ping a telling pass up the field is probably maybe more so than Pádraig or Paddy Deegan. They let it go maybe a little bit quicker rather than with precision. So I think that's, I think they're the parts I'm really interested in looking. And I'm just wondering, can either team sort of bring in a key sort of game changer to shift the emphasis away from that? And I'm probably looking at that. The two midfielders are going to cancel one another out. Both of them are savage working midfielders, great athleticism, and will really go at it. But they may very well just cancel one another out, and there may not be a huge amount of midfield play because of the quality of the players that's there. Yeah.
What do you think of that half-forward line thing, Paddy? And do you think Bubbles will even be in the half-forward line? Because did Wexford expose a little bit of a weakness in his game for work rate? Do you think you could see him in the full forward line?
I would have thought he'd be on the inside line myself, and I think what you're also doing by having him on the inside line is you could end up creating mismatches in there, and that maybe his influence wouldn't be as much out the field, but he could really against this full back line. Not that they're a bad full back line or anything, but there's inexperience in there, and there could be doubt if it became a little bit open in there. And if Shaney starts to move away from the square, which I would envisage him doing, and bringing Hugh Lawler into places he doesn't want to be, and creating those mismatches, and that feeds in as well to what Cheddar is saying. I would imagine Tip are going to go well out the field and match Kilkenny in that, and I think it's actually feeding more into Tipperary's strength than playing a Wexford or playing a Limerick.
Yeah,
I think
that's a good point, Cheddar.
The likes of Dan McCormack, the likes of Bill O'Mara. Like Bill O'Mara is a lot stronger than he looks. And obviously so is Dan McCormack, and they've been playing roles of, are we marking half-backs, are we pulled enough out the field to protect our backline, whereas now the next day probably feeds into the traditional element a bit more, in that the ball will be flying into the mixer just that little bit more, especially Kilkenny. They force you into that game. The other thing is, I think Kilkenny came very far out the field. Like Walter Walsh was under puck up the left day. That's how far out he came. But as Cheddar said, the thing there is, if they win him, have men back to protect the inside area. And if Tipperary's biggest thing they need to do in that situation is, okay, the first 10, 15, 20 minutes, you could have to hit the ball long because there'll be a lot of pressure. But when the time comes to keep your composure, they need to put the ball through the hands. Limerick got a little bit spooked early on. I don't blame them. It happened to me and us in 2011. We got such a rough start. Kilkenny just tore into us that we didn't get our composure back probably all game. And Tip hopefully have the experience to say, hold on now lads, the game's after calming down, let's put the ball through the hands, let's get it to the man in the best position, and then I hope they'd open the game up a little bit after that. But Kilkenny have rediscovered that work rate, or the last game and a half I would say, that got them so far before, and just Tip have to take that on. But the more they draw numbers into that, I think the better for them. I think Cheddar is right with that.
That's a good point, actually, Paddy's, after making their Cheddar, that for the first 10 minutes, while it's frenzied and Kilkenny are tearing in, let it off long. Don't be afraid. Don't get caught, because that's probably where Limerick, they're so predictable in their short game that Kilkenny could have really identified nailing that.
Yeah, look, it's a little bit risky. I'd probably say that, look, if I had the confidence to play it through the hands, I'd do it from the start. So it needs to be manic in terms of the contested ball, and then when you have the ball in your hand, you need composure, and Paddy has explained that well there. So, look, if you have the players to play that, why not move Kilkenny's backs around the field by using the ball and using your own mobility in the forward line? And look, Tip have incredible forwards here. But I think the absolute crucial point to the whole winning of the game for Sunday is what Paddy has explained here. And that's even just looking at this year's. This is not looking at what Paddy's explained with previous games with Tip and Kilkenny. This year, when Kilkenny have won matches, they've played right in the face of teams. That has been very, very intense. Not a thing wrong with it. And you could say that over the course of a game, they've simply worn down the other team. They've simply worn down their game plan. And, teams then the game gets a little bit frantic. And I remember it was Carr Healy said this to me first when we were looking back. I think it might have been the week after the Kilkenny-Dublin game in Nolan Park. And look, Dublin were in the driving seat for 3/4 of that game. Kilkenny were relentless. They never gave up. They were in the face the whole time, fighting for absolutely everything. And then 15 minutes from the end, the game opened up a little bit. Dublin lost their way of playing, and Kilkenny went on and won the match. And it seems to be a sort of the way things have panned out for them in a number of games this year. They are very, very intense, very, very intense in the breaking ball, in the tackling, in the contested ball, in the air game and everything. And over a period of time, they simply knock you out of your stride, and then they have the ability themselves in that type of game to go on and win the game. And I think Tip there have been a couple of games, Paddy, I don't know whether you agree with me or not, when they didn't really, I suppose, step up to that physicality plate, that intensity plate. And if they don't do that on Sunday, Kilkenny will wear down Tip. And if they do, Kilkenny will go on and win the match. And I think it's there that the match will really be lost or won by Tip.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, like the way I put it, if Tip blink for 1 second against Kilkenny, the match will actually just be gone. And the start of the match, and that 10 minutes after half-time where they blew Cork away, where Limerick looked like they were coming back into it, and they kept them at arm's length after half-time, and then they rode the match to the end. And even I remember 2014 playing them, the replay, first 10 minutes of the second half, they suck everybody back, and they let you puck it down, and they just swarm the ball, and then they get their few scores, and they actually sit back, tactically, as they say they don't do, but they sit back, and they're dead right to do it. And Tip needs to be very, very aware of that. But if any player starts thinking about themselves, starts feeling sorry for themselves, I'm a bit tired, or I haven't got a score yet, or my man has got a score, I think that's when the game will be over. And I would see Liam as the man that would not let that happen,
Right. Okay, so here, Paddy, when Dan McCormack and Niall O'Meara are dropping deep into midfield, that's grand. They can't be followed, because the 2016 final, Canelan got 13, 7 of them were from play. 6 of them were from play. John Bubbles got 1-5, 1-4 from play. John McGrath got 1-3 from play. That can destroy Kilkenny. So even more so than Limerick, where they left their half-back line, in position a little bit more. Surely that's what Kilkenny are going. Anyone that says this isn't going to be a tactical game is crazy. Kilkenny have to leave those two lads back. Or if they don't, it's a huge tactical mistake.
But that's all what happens then. So we're talking about that tactic, but it's after that tactic. So the tactics are set, but then the war goes on, and then it comes down to competitive nature. Then it comes down to the savagery, and who actually then wins that battle around the middle. And whoever wins that battle around the middle, you're damn right their half back line is going to have to move up the field. Right. Because if Limerick got a few more balls to hand around the middle of the field, their touch was a little better. They fumbled a few balls, and they started supplying a few more balls in. Then we would have seen a different Kilkenny. I saw the reverse angle from behind the goal. Kilkenny were sitting 2, if not 3, in their half back line, and a few balls were just being passed out and had been fumbled. Or great work rate from Kilkenny, and it just allowed them to sit back and provide that cover. And again, both teams will set out their tactic. You're to sit in your half back line, or you're to sit in your half back line, and whichever team is winning that battle, you unfortunately won't be able to stay there for long if the ball keeps coming in.
Yeah, so it'll actually be Dan, McCormack, Cheddar and O'Mara versus Walter and Donnelly. That's going to...
I don't know whether it'll actually, and Paddy be obviously much closer than I will, but I actually think that Dan and Michael Breen might actually start in the middle of the field.
All right. You think Noel McGrath, you think shooters will be in the Tipperary half forward line?
Well, look, you'll be trying to get your shooter free. Will Noel McGrath want to be eaten up by Conor Brown or Conor Fogarty or Buckley? Conor Brown and Conor Fogarty are very, very intense, very, very aggressive players. And, will you want to get your main shooter wrapped up in that type of game, or will you want him to be maybe a little bit more free? And if you look at Pádraig Welch, he can't leave six, he can't drift off out the field and follow Noel. So you automatically now or Kilkenny have a problem. How do we handle this? And I suppose that's and the very same with Bubbles. Like, you play Bubbles, out near the midfield line, and you're a wing back, and you drift out 20 metres. You're gone too far. Pádraig will put the ball across field over your head, and now that's coming in on the floor into the likes of John McGrath. Look, sure, that's just manna for him. He'll be just scoring points all day, and the same with Jason Ford. I think, Paddy, that you have probably, and look, I'm saying that when I'm looking at the likes of Adrian Mullen and Richie Hogan on the other side, there are some serious forwards here, and how you screen your backs here is crucial. You cannot leave space here, because you will be hurt, and hurt badly, if you do that. So I think, it may not be a defensive as in a sweeper or something like that, but it won't surprise me either. And I suppose that's what I was just saying, Paddy, in terms of looking at a key game changer. Will somebody look for a different formation in the forwards, maybe look for a 2-1-2, two half forward line, a man in the middle, and we'll say two full forwards, and just use a player then as a third midfielder, defensive screen in front of centre back to allow Paddy to drop back to the half circle?
I think that's interesting for Tip, in that Seamus Callan has been playing in and out all year. So he's sometimes spent time inside, sometimes spent time out. And what I was thinking to myself is, okay, you have a man playing his first All-Ireland final and a marquee forward. It's a stressful enough playing an All-Ireland final in your first year anyway, but now you're on one of the best forwards in the game. And will he be the man, okay, spend some time inside and challenge him inside, but is he going to bring him out the field then? And as you say, you can push your centre forward, whoever that may be, out, and then your midfielders can sit. So I wholeheartedly agree with you, though. Whoever gets to sit that bit more will condense the space, and they'll be able to release their forwards. But it's just going to be, a lot of this is how it organically works on the day then, because that mightn't be working at all. That could be Kilkenny just able to push right back up the field and kind of hammer you back into your backline. So it just depends, again, when the tactics are set, if we're able to get the ball through the hands, if Tipperary can, and pop it into place, or then if we're condensed, or Kilkenny able to keep us there with their work rate that they did the last day. So I just think it's very interesting. We won't know until we see the sort of work that Tipper are able to do. And I get what you're saying with Noel McGrath as a centre forward or wherever, but I think those players, those five players on both teams, midfielders and half forwards, they're going to spend so much time out the field that you might know who is playing in what of the position. So I'm not sure it's entirely, it's going to be all that entirely important who they are. They'll be trying to get Noel McGrath free anyway, and somebody on to mark him, but possibly in centre forward could be one. Sheedy did it years ago, I suppose, against Brick, against Waterford.
Yeah, no, and like Darragh Egan was interviewed during the week. He's a tip selector, and he's goalkeeping coach, and he was asked about the Tipperary style, and he says, I don't think there's a definition, but movement plays a big part in it, and ball playing ability. So the movement thing, and Paddy's touched on that, about the forwards rotate a lot and they move around, and I don't think any of them will stay. Like, Callan could go centre forward, Bubbles can come in and out, and they keep you guessing. And that's the question then. Should Hugh Lawler hold the full back position and not be dragged somewhere he's less although he's played wing back for Loughlin Gales, I reckon he wouldn't be that uncomfortable in the half back line. But when forwards are rotating around, is the good idea to follow them or to hold your position and let the other leg come down to you and back every defender you have to be able to take on their direct opponent?
I think it depends on the resources you have. Wooly, look, generally speaking, backs hand over forwards like that to one another, and they have a good plan of handover like that. But I think what we're saying is a little bit different. Hugh is now going to start as a full back, but probably maybe 30 metres out in front of the goal. He's going to be between where normally 3 and 6 would be, and that's a very different area now, because you are now going to be defending, running towards your own goal most of the time. Defenders like to keep the man and the ball in front of him. and so it's is he used to doing that? But incidentally, he has been brilliant this year, and was absolutely brilliant on Gillane. And done that when he was on his own. He was isolated. He solved that problem himself, rather than waiting for backup and that. And just going back to Paddy's point, and I think he's explained it really well here. Look, the game is going to run, and then how do people react to things? And I'm just making the point that I think if Tip can handle going toe-to-toe with Kilkenny and can handle that part of the game, they probably have more options in terms of moving people around the place to create a different way of playing. And they certainly have an advantage in doing that. Whereas a number of years ago, you could have said, Richie Hogan would have given that, option to Kilkenny. He could go out the field, he could come out, as he did below in Kilkenny actually against Galway, come in as a third midfielder and did cause some problems. But he may not have the quickness and athleticism anymore to be able to play that in an All-Ireland final. I think Tip have those options in the forward. You could play any of those forwards anywhere, provided of course that they do the toe-to-toe hurling and the tackling and all of that. And if they do, I just think there's a little bit of an advantage here for Tip if the game pans out like that.
And yeah, exactly. And Kilkenny, interestingly enough, Tipperary are much more experienced, Paddy. The Kilkenny are going to have Adrian Mullen, Hugh Lawler, Conor Brown, John Donnelly, Paddy Deegan, maybe Richie Leahy, depending. Buckley could get his place, but they could have 6 players who've never played in an All-Ireland final, which it's usually the other way around when it comes to Kilkenny playing someone.
It is. I don't see it as a huge disadvantage for them, really, because number one, I think all those players have shown very, very good character and confidence. Some over the last couple of years, and then others this year with Mullen and Hugh Lawler. I think they've both been exceptional. And then they did play the All-Ireland champions in Detroit on the last day, which, that could have been an All-Ireland final in itself. So I don't see it as an absolutely massive one. And then on the other side, you could say, well, we've gained experience now, so we've nothing to lose. This is our first match. These Tip lads maybe are looking to hang on for another medal. So that could be their mentality with it. So I don't see it as a massive disadvantage. And, I know it's a traditional thing, but I don't think they won't fear Tip and Tip won't fear them. And I don't even think that's going to be in their mind. They'll just be so focused on what they're going to be doing.
Right, okay, Cheddar, you go along with that.
Fully agree with that. Absolutely agree with that, Paddy. I think when you look at all of the players in Kilkenny and Tip, look, they're just fantastic players in their position, and they are going to deliver. Everybody's going to deliver here on Sunday. I'll be very, very surprised if somebody just doesn't deliver. And if you just look at Adrian Mullen, I think you mentioned him earlier on, look what he's done in the club of All-Ireland and what he has done since at county level. He'd be tipping along there and you might think, God, he hasn't got on the ball that much, and then out of nothing he scores 3 points, some of it on the back foot, like some incredible stuff is what he has done here. So these are all top quality players, and look, they've still a fair core of players in that team that have won All-Ireland medals and have been part of the great team. So, and I think the other point is really important is what Paddy has said here. This is not a new team coming into an All-Ireland, fearing the occasion, fearing playing a team with 30 or 40 All-Irelands and so on. Tip will always think to have the edge over Kilkenny and vice versa. So there's no real psychological advantage or edge. There's just one interesting thing, Paddy. It would be interesting if there was a bolter here, similar to, I don't know, Walter Walsh a couple of years ago in an All-Ireland. Do both teams have somebody here that can grab the game with the scruff of the neck, come in off the sideline, change things completely around, and all your plans then go straight down the river?
Yeah, I don't know when they start. The only issue I see with that is I think nearly both teams are delighted to be playing as well as they have. I think Kilkenny have been looking for this mix for the last couple of years, and I see them. They're after getting the smelling sauce and they're after waking up into this style they're playing, and there hasn't too many positions changed over. Okay, only through necessity, maybe Pádraig Walsh went back corner back, but I think they're after finding what they're looking for the last couple of years. So I think, and they're after beating the All-Ireland champions, and I would think, it's just what I think, is that Cody would say to himself, well, we have this, the train is on the tracks and we want to keep it going, see can we blow past Tipperary here now, and I would see that. And with Tip, I think Sheedy has massive trust in who he has. And again, the last day, the subs paid massive dividends. And I think that he says, well, look, they now have the confidence to come on. But I'm not sure would I start any of them when the skin and hair is flying early on. I'm not sure is there anyone that say, yeah, we're going to throw that lad in. Bar maybe, you said maybe they'll just have a corner back playing or James Barry playing. That's the only thing I would see. I don't see any of the forwards being put in there because they're all extremely young. But they're certainly talented if they come on and the game is opened up, and Tipperary are putting the ball through the hands in the second half.
Yeah, well, we need a replay for this rabbit to be pulled out of a hat, Cheddar, don't we? Isn't that Cody's style and Davy Fitz' style? We've got the Walter
yeah,
and
I suppose when you look back at Walter, Walter was a different player. He was 6'5". He's a massive man.
He's still 6'5".
He's still 6'5", and he's still a brilliant player. Yeah. No, I suppose when you're looking at that, you do need somebody with something different to really give the other team something to think about here. And when you look at a lot of the replacements here, and it will be important on Sunday in terms of people coming on the field and that, but you're probably replacing like with like. So you're unlikely, as Paddy has said, to see somebody start off the game that's going to make a big difference to the game.
Yeah, great stuff, lads. We'll be back with Paddy Power predictions. Okay, so Paddy Power predictions, I call this, but it's just one prediction here, lads. That's it. Kilkenny, according to Paddy Power, outsiders 11-8. Tipperary are 5-6. The draw is 8-1. I'll repeat, the draw is 8-1. This has never happened before. And then there's a handicap of -1, which you wouldn't even be entertaining. Well, I wouldn't anyways, in a game like this. Cheddar, I'll go to you first.
Look, I'm a Leinster man. My heart is with Kilkenny. So I hope they win. But there's... Look, if Tip can, as I said earlier on, bring fight to the fight and go toe-to-toe with Kilkenny in that intense period in the game and still hold their game plan, I just think they have too much options. So the heart might say Kilkenny, but the head might say Tipperary. Right,
okay. That's interesting. Leinster hurling is a bit like Ulster football. They all back each other up. Munster doesn't have that same loyalty down there, Paddy, do you? I'm sure you wouldn't be back in Cork if they were in the All-Ireland final.
No, we're well against each other, but Cork aren't too bad, actually. We usually get on well enough with them. It's the rest of them all hate this, so we have to deal with that, but we get over it anyway.
Yeah, so who are you going for?
I think Leinster have Stockholm syndrome, though. They're so used to Kilkenny baiting them around the place that they've fallen in love with them somehow.
It's just turned to
respect. No, Paddy, we were so used to them baiting you around the place as well.
That's all right. We won a few. We're not too bad.
Go on, Paddy.
Sorry about that, Cheddar. No, I know that's hard there, but we got on well for an hour.
I got on well. I should have brought up this Munster Leinster thing earlier in the show and got a real go. I do like the Stockholm syndrome one, and I will be using it in the future, Paddy. So I'll give you credit for that one.
That's all right.
They've been beaten into submission, and now they love Kilkenny.
They love Kilkenny. They can't go against them anymore. No, look, it's all a bit of crack anyway. But to be fair, look, I hope I'm being objective. I think Tip will win. I think they could win by maybe 3 points, something around that region. I backed Limerick for the Munster final, not backed them, but I thought they'd win, and they did. So I'm not just going with my heart. I do think if Tipperary, as I said, if they blink for 1 second, this match is over. Kilkenny will put a 5-10 minute spurt on them, and they won't be able to come back. Well, I think Sheedy has a track record in 09 and 10 of, as the game came to the knockout stages, the performances and intensity went up a step every time. I do think it actually needs to come up because the first half against Wexford wasn't aggressive enough, it wasn't intense enough. I think he'll make that step up. He's great to get that fire going, that emotion. I think that it'll be 2 fair dogs hitting each other on Sunday, but I think Tip will be able to stand up to it. And as Cheddar said, I think they have more options, to get the scores as the game goes on.
Here's a quick one, Cheddar, before we finish up. When Tip beat Kilkenny in the 2 finals, they've beaten them well. Is it fair to say if Tip beat Kilkenny, they could beat them by maybe 7 or 8, whereas if it was a close game, you might shade towards Kilkenny? Would that be fair based on the other finals?
No, look, there may be something in that, because look, you could flip this on the other side and you could say that, look, Kilkenny, they will dog this out, and let's say 50 minutes in, 60 minutes in, that there's nothing in it, and if the game breaks out then and just Tip lose their way, and one thing that you will notice from that straight away, if Tip forwards stop tackling and stop breaking down the ball coming out of their forward line at that, or coming out of the Kilkenny back line at that stage, Kilkenny are going to win the game here. So look, it can flip either way, but we're dependent on some things here. We're dependent on that Tipperary are going to be able to go toe to toe here in the physical stakes and be able to sustain that right through, and then that their hurling ability, and particularly their forwards ability, will see them home. But look, you could argue the other way as well. Incidentally, there's one other little statistic. Paddy, correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the first time that finalists in senior and in minor are not their provincial finalists? I think that's the case.
Right, okay.
I think somebody said that. No, I won't correct you now, but I think I heard that said previously last week or two.
Right,
Yeah.
that's an interesting one. Kilkenny Galway, obviously in the minor, we haven't given them any mention. But look, it's back to Kilkenny tipping the senior, and Kilkenny have a minor, and we're back to the dominance again. So we'll finish it on a.
One thing there, Willie. Sorry, one thing about the tight match. I was just thinking during the week psychologically, and not to run on the show all day, but I think this tip team are actually looking, even if a tight game. I think they know that they've won 2 big wins against Kilkenny. I have it in my head, and I'm sure they have it in their head, that they haven't won a tight one against Kilkenny.
Right.
They won a tight game the last day. I would say there could be something that's on their mind as well, and maybe going into the match. So I wouldn't be surprised even if it was tight if Tip pulled it.
That could be something Sheedy's focusing on all week, and to make sure that they're up for that fight when it comes down to it.
That would be my thinking, that they're looking at that the experienced players. We won by 10 points and 10 points or whatever it was. Let's get into the trenches and let's prove ourselves, because that's what that has been the commentary, and it's fair commentary.
Yeah. Sorry, just before we go, Wooly, there's one final point I'd like to make. I just referenced the 1971 All Ireland there. Fan Larkin was Kilkenny cornerback that day, had a little bit of a setback there a week or two ago, so I just like to wish him a quick return to health.
Yeah, okay, nice way to end the show, Cheddar. Thanks very much. Right, we'll be back. Well, we're back tomorrow night. We're in Liberty Hall for the live show, and we'll be back on Monday, so we'll talk to you then.